Hello, my name is Cindy Richard. I am the director and co-founder of Suicide Prevention of York. September is Suicide Prevention Month. Through weekly podcasts, we will be discussing with professionals not only how we can help survivors of suicide, but the professionals that help the person through their mental health journey. In addition, how can we prevent suicide from happening in all York County communities? Our podcast series will include professionals in the fields of mental health, medical, education, older adults, and first responders. In addition, we will provide 2 podcasts on programs we are offering to school districts throughout York County to help prevent suicide, Avidum and Hope Squad. Today, we're lucky to have 3 first responders, a police officer, a fireman, and an EMT. Hello, how are you all today?
Hi, good.
Let's go around and introduce yourself. Say a little bit about why you're here today.
My name's Officer Michael Reinert. I work for the York City Police Department. I've been there 15 years. I've been in a lot of different roles in my 15 years. Some as a patrolman, some as specialty units, and now probably one of my favorite roles that I've been in. I'm partnered with Victory, who is sitting here next to me. She's an English lab, and our primary function is community relations. She also is here for dealing with persons with mental health problems, which is obviously part of what we're talking about here. She's been great in that area. She's trained as a service dog. She's trained to recognize when someone's having a struggle, whether it be anxiety or some other issue. So that's been great. I've also been involved in crisis intervention training for quite a long time. I'm a trainer in that area also for the county. So that kind of parlays again into the same area that we're talking about. I'm also a negotiator on the quick response team for the county.
Wonderful.
That really parlays into what we're talking about, because quite oftentimes when we're out on barricaded subjects or suicidal subjects, a lot of these skills that I've learned over the years come into play. So that's just a brief overview of what I have done in the past couple of years. We can get more into depth if we want to, but
Thank you. Thank you. Dustin?
Dustin Werner. I started as a volunteer fireman back in 2005 with West York, and now I have 13 years in with Baltimore City Fire Department, but still live here in Red Lion.
Okay.
I'm
Michael.
Matt Giacopelli. I'm currently a paramedic for York Regional EMS. Been involved in EMS for about 30 years now. Started out as a cadet at SUNY Maritime College in the Bronx in New York City.
Wow.
So I've had some time in New York City, on Long Island, and then moved down here about 11 years ago. Been a flight paramedic while I was back up on Long Island. So varied experience, I guess, as time has gone on. While I was in college, one night I had some mental health issues and nearly jumped from a 6-story window.
Wow.
So this subject has become very close to me, obviously, and it's something actually I go out and speak at various conferences about, trying to break the stigma of mental health in emergency services.
And thank you for that. Thank you. Not that you were going to do that, but thank you for being so honest about that. And it is something that we see that people have dealt with earlier in their lives and have gone on to live wonderful lives, and they're very thankful that they chose to live.
I'm just hoping that me talking about it will encourage other people to be able to talk about it.
Exactly. Thank you for that. Well, welcome again. And on any given day, we know that you all have some of the toughest jobs, and you respond to many different calls during the day, and you don't know they're coming. They just happen. So how do you go from maybe a suicide call or to another type of call and still retain your professionalism and do the job that you are so good at? Anyone can start.
I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, sometimes that's tough. I mean, I'm not going to lie about that. It's hard, and you have to. The way I personally deal with it, and I think every officer might tell you something different. I don't think this is something you can say with a broad stroke that this is what you do. I think each individual person probably handles it a different way. I know for us, sometimes we deal with it by humor with each other.
Yes.
Oftentimes, and you know, I know people sometimes have difficulty with it, but I know, for instance, I've been on scenes of traumatic things and been caught on camera laughing, whether it's me or other officers, and people don't understand why you're doing that. And I try to often convey to individuals that question that is that sometimes in those traumatic scenes you have to put yourself at ease in some way, and it's not meant as anything negative, but sometimes I think
Comedy
that,
relieves stress at times.
yeah, and sometimes you just have to get away from what's going on for even just a brief period.
Yes.
And you will often see that with police. I'm sure that's probably similar in other first responders. I think it's just one way. And another way, I think for me, I just try to realize I did the best I could do. So even though if it doesn't always turn out the way I wanted it to, or even if it's something really traumatic, if I go there and try the best that I could do and leave there knowing that I tried the best I could do, I just have to let go the rest of it and move on to the next thing.
And that is true, and I'm sure the two of you too have been in situations where it hasn't turned out the way you wanted it to turn out, but you have to have that ability to say, I did the best I knew I could do, and take that. Have you all had the similar situations?
Yes, it's pretty much exactly what he said. You know, we do our best, you know, for the patient, and you know, we do have to move on. And certainly, I've got that warped sense of humor. Most of my friends will tell me it's not a great sense of humor, but it's certainly warped. You know, you know, we go on to the next call, and we still have a job to do. And you know, that particular patient, that particular scene, that particular fire, you know, requires our, you know, utmost attention now. That we have to focus on that, and we have to put that other one behind us. Which, again, like he said, is not always the easiest thing to do. It's still always in the back of your mind, but you know, that next patient doesn't.
And you know, I've had questions from survivors, people that have lost people to suicide. You know, do you all see these people as people when you go there, or is it just a number, or is it just an incident?
It's kind of a task list. Like, if you consider that, like, if you're defending yourself in a fight, or you have, you know, 10 or 15 things you have to do for this patient, you know, we have a burning building, we have a whole task list of things to do.
Yeah.
That's more of how we view it.
It does help to focus on the task at hand, like you said. You go down that checklist. Okay, well, this is what we're doing for this person. This is what we're doing now, and step by step. You know, just do that. But it's, you know, at the end of the call, end of the day, it's still a person, in one way or another that you're.
Yeah, and you know, when I first started in this and started doing podcasts and stuff, that was not podcasts, but talking to people about suicide and that kind of thing. People had to remind me, Cindy, they're people, and that is, you really have to focus on that. And you know, I've gotten a lot better at that too. When you start giving statistics, they're not just stats. They're people.
And I can tell you, I've learned that over years. I wasn't always the officer I am now. I was much less focused on the human side than I am now.
Yeah.
And I learned that over time. And that's the hard thing, I think, as an officer, is we are task-oriented, because you go there and you're like, you know, whatever the call is, this is, you know, even if it's a suicidal subject, the goal is to get there and try to stop that from happening and move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that makes it hard for us is, you know, we're fixers. That's what we do. We fix stuff, and I think that makes it tough because we can't. To be truthful, most things we can't fix.
Yeah, you can't.
And you know, some of these things are super complex. Whatever's going on, most of the time it's really complex for that particular individual. And for us, our mentality, generally speaking, is we're going to go there, we're going to fix it, and we're going to move on to the next call. So that can sometimes become difficult, and that goes back to, you know, trying as an officer to learn to empathize with people and understand they are human, and I'm not just going there and getting it done and moving on. But some of that is out of necessity because you have to, because you have so much call volume, and they can probably attest to that. It's the same thing. You can't, you know, maybe you want to spend 2 hours dealing with that individual, but you got to get them, whether it be an EMT or a fireman, you got to get the people out of the house, and you got to move on to the next task, and so that sometimes is hard to.
And everybody has their role to play. I get the coroner's reports right after a suicide has happened, and so I get to read, you know, every step of everything that they do, and many times it's not necessarily what the first responders do. It's more of what the coroner's office does with the families. You know, they're more into. Everybody has their job to do, but everybody works together. It kind of makes the family feel a little more important too.
Part of it's learning your limitations. So, you know, when we first show up, if you're there with a knife, my goal is to get it out of your hands, get you in a medic unit, get you to somebody that at the hospital is way better at dealing with that type of thing than I am. And learning, like, okay, that's all I can. Sitting there and talking for 3 hours isn't making, in my opinion, a huge impact, because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I don't know the right things to say all the
Yeah,
time.
everybody has their position and their job to do. Yeah.
I certainly agree with that, but, you know, a lot of it starts with just letting the person talk, especially amongst ourselves, you know, in the business, I guess you could say.
Active listening skills.
But certainly,
listening.
it's really, it's where it all has to start, is somebody just
Absolutely.
opening up, talking. And if they're gonna ramp for 3 hours, then, you know, you don't necessarily need to say anything, although you may want to say something, which we always do, you know,
It
we wanna be
depends
able
on-
to comfort them and.
It depends on the organization. I mean, if we're on scene for more than a half hour, they're saying, where are you?
Yeah.
Other stuff happens.
I'm not saying
You
you
know
should
about
sit on
that.
the scene right now.
Yeah,
You know.
and each one of
But-
you have a different position too. A fireman may get another call and has to go right on out, you know. And I hear that from survivors in the support groups. They many times, especially when they first come to the support groups, one of the first things they talk about is the first responding team. You know, were they good? Were they not? Were they, you know, did they understand us? Were they helpful? And many times they're very happy that, you know, that they've given all their time.
But this is one thing that, you know, I've been a field training officer for a while. I haven't been doing it much lately, but for years I did, and I always try to relay that to anyone that I'm training, is those first initial moments, you have to figure out, you know, what do I have to let this person tell me, you know, because again, we're always, all of us in this line of work, kind of get on scene and we're going to control the situation.
Exactly.
And you have to really fight that, because yes, you have to have control, because we have to maintain safety and so forth. But when you're talking about dealing with someone who's in a crisis,
Yeah.
a lot of times you have to look at that slightly different, because you might have to give that person a little more time, and that is a struggle, because it's not our nature. Because of what we do, we want to get in, control the scene, control what's going on, and fix it and make it go on to the next thing. So that you have to fight.
Yeah.
Very often, at least I find that.
And bringing someone off that's getting ready to jump, or bringing someone off a building, is a little different than showing up where they're already hurt, where you have to, you know, the EMT has to take place, or the building's burning down, you know.
Right.
So your jobs are very different, and the
Although I'm sure
situation
there's
could be
many
very
times
different.
when they show up on scene,
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
the first ones there
Yeah.
before anybody else gets there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there are. You know, I've only lost one client in counseling to suicide, and sometimes what I found was that I just have to put words to what I'm feeling, and you need your colleagues sometimes for that. And I can remember reaching out to my colleagues and just saying, I need some words to put to this. And once I found the words, I could start healing, and I could start thinking through everything that was going on. What do you need when you've come to a scene where there's been a death, whether it's suicide, drugs, car accident, or a mixture of all those? They can be a mixture too. What do you need? What do you need from your colleagues or from people that you depend on to start working through all this?
Just an ear. Like, if I can talk, because that's the thing. Like, a lot of people, I presume in your profession, but I know in ours, like, they will not reach out. There's people that will bottle that stuff up for years.
Yes.
And so the start of it is just to talk, and I don't care if I'm telling, my 5 best friends the same thing and hearing the same thing back.
Mm-hmm.
The more you talk about it, it's like like a pressure cooker, a tea kettle. Like, eventually, all the steam's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you kind of feel like you're starting to get back to normal.
I know in the police world, we've done a lot better at understanding that after a critical incident, you have to debrief or talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's, you probably heard of the CISM team.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a great idea, because it's sometimes difficult to relay what you're feeling to someone who's not able to relate directly to what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning sometimes it's not easy to go sit with a counselor or a psychologist. It's not the same as sitting with another person who has experienced similar things to you and
Yeah.
feeling like I can talk to them because they understand exactly what I'm going through. So I think that is good, but there still is a stigma
Oh, yeah.
to ever admitting that you're having a problem. As much as we've done a good job, it's still there. I don't think anyone that I work with would feel comfortable saying, yeah, I'm having a really hard time with this. They just wouldn't do it.
When we do QPR, question, persuade, and refer workshops, it's very difficult to get first responders to come to these. I've done some with the police departments in the city, and I've done some with firemen and EMTs. And going back to the comment you made about making a joke out of things and laughing about things, I can remember the first one I did it was firemen and EMTs in the city. And there was 1 or 2 that were just joking through the whole thing. I mean, they were laughing through the whole thing, and it was really irritating me. And when I approached, I didn't really approach him. He kind of approached me at the end. I had found out he had just been on a suicide call the week before. And I knew about this call because I knew the person that died. And I also knew how wonderful the family thought of him on the scene. So, but that's what he was working through. He was working through, it was really too soon for him to go through a QPR workshop, I think, because he was still grieving. But he needed that time, and that's the way he reacted. So I can hear you on what you're saying too, because
And I think that's just the way some people process it.
it's the way you process it, yeah. And not knowing the background behind it, you might see it as being, well, that's being very insensitive. But anything else about who you would contact if you were having, or if you saw someone on your team that didn't seem to be doing really well, and you were concerned about their mental health, would you approach them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our city CISM team does something different than what I've never heard of the CISM team doing this, but if I was part of a really traumatic incident probably 6 or 7 years ago, And I wasn't the center of it, but I was one of the people that responded to it. And instead of waiting for you to call them, they called me the next morning. and
That's
said,
right.
You know, hey, are you doing all right? We heard you were part of this. And I had never heard of that before. Like, I never expected to get that call, but that's really good, because if you're having a rough time and you're one of those people that don't want to tell somebody, there's something, you might just break down where you're at if somebody walks up and says, you know, I heard you're going to bed. What do you need?
I know for our, a lot of our traumatic incidents, it's mandatory. You have to go, which in some ways I think is a good thing, because.
Is it
again,
individual or group?
It depends. It depends on the scenario.
Okay.
But sometimes if like there's a group of people that are involved in a traumatic incident, it might be open to, like, everybody that was involved is gonna show up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have a choice.
I've heard of
You
it
have
both
to go.
ways, yeah.
And I think that's good, because a lot of times we just wouldn't go. You know, we think we can handle it, and sometimes people go and don't say a thing. They just sit there and listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's even therapeutic sometimes. Listening to other people talk about it can be therapeutic.
Mhm.
Because I think it helps you understand, if you're listening to someone else talk about it, that they're feeling similar to I do. I don't feel comfortable talking
Mhm.
about it, but I at least know that they're feeling the kind of things I'm feeling. So I think that is helpful.
Mhm.
So.
I know of one fireman that we've lost to suicide in York County within the last few years.
We've lost 3 paramedics.
3 paramedics. Yes.
About 1, 2 weeks ago.
Yes, yes. How do you work through losing one of your own to suicide?
It wasn't easy. Especially 2 of them were more or less, one is probably a result of the other.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that happens.
Yes. You know, one of them was a very popular paramedic everybody was very close with.
Mhm.
I kind of likened him to Robin Williams, I guess, without the drinking and drugs. But
Mhm.
you know, he was one of those guys that always, you know, wanted to make you laugh, you know, have a good time. But was an excellent paramedic. Was one of those paramedics that you trust your children with, and nobody ever saw it coming. He didn't reach out to anybody. We never knew. And just one night, we all just got, you know, notifications that he was gone. And the recent suicide was a friend of his who was also a paramedic, who wound up being the deputy coroner that processed the scene. So that just sort of led to,
I know you
you know.
do.
So, you know, it's kind of the thing we've built up that stigma, you know, way back when, and the whole suck it up buttercup attitude, and don't show any weakness, and we're the ones that help other people. We don't need the help, and we've got to break that.
Mhm.
And because these are the things that happen in all 3 services, and, you know, into the dispatch centers and the emergency rooms and such too.
Mhm.
If we can't talk about it ourselves and get those of us, our, you know, brothers and sisters who are going through these situations to talk about it, and I don't know what we're going to do. But certainly, you know, it starts with just talking.
It does. And knowing that they're human beings and they have families, you know, that's.
I
Well,
mean,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, keep interrupting me.
That's all right. I was just gonna parlay off that one of the things I always try to say to people or relay to people that are struggling with some type of mental disorder or depression or whatever that could lead to what we're talking about is, you know, if you think about it, if you have a heart issue, the first thing that comes to your mind is, I'm going to go see the doctor to see what's going on. Or if you have, you know, your leg's not working right, or you're limping, or first thing that comes to your mind is, I'm going to go see a doctor to see what's happening. But when you're having some sort of mental illness, whatever it may be, it doesn't come to mind that I need to go see, because the brain is an organ just like all the rest of your organs, and it's not functioning correctly. I need to go seek help. But if we could try to push that idea
Exactly.
more,
Very well said. Yeah.
I mean, it's a cultural change. It needs to be a cultural change. I know that one of my better friends in the fire department reached out to me when she was feeling that way. And the thing that was holding her up from getting professional help was she was worried it would be a mark on her medical record that the city would then hold against her.
Yep. Military's the very same way. Yeah.
Right. And so even though that's definitely not a great way to think, like I have 3 or 4 people in the fire department that I can call, and I don't think I've ever sought help through the fire department, but however, I do see a psychologist, I do talk to those people. But if it has to be a change that has buy-in from the highest level of your employer.
Yes. And people have to be willing to understand that mental health does not define you. It's who you are. It's just like you said, something, you know, it's just as much as a physical illness as, you know, as anything else. So physical illness and mental illness go together, and we have seen it just so many times, especially in our older adults. You know, they perceive they have an issue, they perceive they have a problem, and so they just can't live with it, so they take their life. Or maybe they do have heart issues, or maybe they do have, you know, a physical issue that they just can't deal with. But, you know, as you all know, it can be fixed in some form or fashion so that you can move on and have a normal life.
The other interesting part that I find is that there is a stigma, and people think negatively of mental health,
Mhm.
but virtually everyone suffers from some mental
Yeah,
health
no one's
problem
brain
in
is
their lifetime.
destroyed.
There's probably not a person alive
No.
who has never suffered some type of mental
For sure.
issue where they probably could have been helped by a doctor, or
Yeah.
even just maybe something as basic as talking to other people about
Yeah.
their problem. I would think every single person has experienced that at least sometime in their life.
Everybody
but there's still a
has
stigma
that,
about
yeah.
it.
And anybody can take their life. I mean, there's no discrimination when it comes to
No.
that. So it can be anyone, and for that reason, you know, everybody has mental health issues. There's no one that doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, my philosophy on it is this. I mean, you know, if he pulls up on a scene, he finds himself in a fight or getting shot at, he's going to call for backup. You know, if he shows up and finds a fully involved house fire, he's going to call for backup. If I show up at a crash where there's 14, 15 patients, I'm going to call for backup. It's no different. Like if you're having mental health issues, call for backup. We all know like what we get into. If we haven't been on that particular call, we're going to be at some point, and we're going to know what each other is going through. So, you know, just reaching out to each other for backup in a mental health issue should be no different from, you know, calling for backup on
Exactly.
the scene for anything.
Very well said. And I have heard you're all men, and men have a difficult time handling mental health issues, period, you know. But I have also heard that certain men that I know of that have had some, you know, either a suicide in their life or they've had some mental health background issues, they know who they can call, and those friends are right there. They come right on over and they talk to them man to man. And you know, women like to talk, men tend to hold it all in. And if you're in the first responder, you even tend to hold it in more, I think. And in the mental health field, if you're in the mental health field, you tend to keep it in more because I work with people like this. I should know what to do, you know.
And what's the bottom line on all that? We fix stuff. So
Yeah.
if we're the fixers,
Yeah.
how are we going to say we need to be
It
fixed?
goes back
And
to
that's-
fixing.
Yeah.
It's like a parent too, you know, a parent wants to fix things. So we do tend to go back on that. And people that usually go into the first responders field, mental health fields, counseling, whatever, you're a helping person. You want to help people. So again, you want to fix it. And so I think that's something we carry within our own bodies too. We are the last ones to reach out. And so when we don't reach out, we're the only ones that seem to be the ones getting hurt. But so at the end of the day, what do you do to relax? What types of things do you do to relax?
I'll let you start this time.
So I've just started getting into fitness, down 30 pounds.
Good.
And, unfortunately, jiu-jitsu is what jacked this ankle off, which means I'm off till the beginning of September. Video games, I have 4 kids, so they keep me pretty busy. I'm still working on getting that whole meditating. I'll say meditating is definitely a huge help.
Nice. Good.
I need to do better at that, but certainly going fishing with my boys or playing video games with them when I can. Music is a big thing.
Music, yeah. And, yeah, that seems to take people to a more calming
Got really mellow
atmosphere.
listening to a Jimmy Buffett concert last night. So.
Yeah, and fishing. I have clients that do a lot of fishing. You know, when they have anxiety issues, they go fishing. And I thought, okay, that sounds good. Yeah.
So fishing is a big one for me.
Oh, good.
My wife enjoys it too, which is something we do together. I'm a big hunter. I spend a lot of times in the woods. That is very calming, obviously, being out, being one with nature. My wife and I travel a lot. We try to get out and experience life. And for us, that's been better than anything else, just getting out and seeing different places. And
just getting away.
Experiencing
and, yeah.
things.
Yeah.
You know, making experiences rather than worrying about, having stuff. Just having experiences is
Focusing on living.
Yeah. Right,
And,
living life.
yeah.
Enjoying
And
life.
Nature, yeah. I've heard so many people talk about how they've become more one with nature since COVID. And because that's the safest way to get out, and just get out into the woods and get places where there aren't so many people and everything. And it is just, as they say, they found a new way of calming. I'm huge when it comes to things like that. I'd rather spend time in the woods or in the mountains than anywhere else. But it is, and each one of you have mentioned different ways of how you can relax, and that's so important, especially in your all's jobs.
Relaxing is a big one because, now I don't know, I presume you operate out of the station, you're probably on the street most of the time. But, that bell, just, you hear it in your sleep.
I'm sure.
And I mean, I remember when I first got into this job, I was out eating at Old Country Buffet when that was still a thing with my father. And I was like, well, let me go to the bathroom before we catch a run. And he was like, you're at the restaurant, like you're not at work. That anxiety really ingrains itself in you. So actually I haven't gotten into fishing, but I've thought more and more about it because you're away, you'd be on that boat for 16 hours at that. And there's no bells, there's no, I guess, radio calls for you, like, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely calming. Being outdoors, and that's a big one.
Yeah, being outdoors, and it doesn't really matter if it's a nice day or a rainy day. It's just that you're out there and you're away from the stress of your jobs, and that's important.
Which brings up like another point that we have, like we've all seen some things in our jobs, but I've ran into things off duty too. You haven't mentally prepared yourself. Like I go in for a 24-hour shift. I don't feel like I can decompress till the end of that shift. So I've had a house fire. I've had a car accident with fatality like 11 years ago, right at the end of the street, actually off duty. And so it's more traumatic when it happens off because you're not prepared for it. I Narcaned somebody in front of my 7-year-old. I think it was last summer. So when that kind of stuff happens, you have to run through it again and again and again because you didn't prepare. Like you were just driving down the street going to pauses.
Yeah.
I had to do CPR on a lady in Chincoteague, Virginia, in the surf, who ultimately, unfortunately, I never found out, and that's one of the, you don't always find out what happens.
Yeah.
I don't know if she passed or not, but it took like a half hour for the ambulance because that's all the way at the end of the island. And so me and my ex-wife at the time did CPR on her for like 20 minutes.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought about you doing something like that off duty because you are trained, and why wouldn't you? I'm sure as an EMT.
You truly never shut it off. I
You
can tell you
don't.
that. I mean, you try, but you still, like, for instance, for me, as a police officer, when I go in anywhere, I'm always paying attention to what's going on. And you never can shut that off. I don't think even after you retire, you're going to shut it off because it's just ingrained in you. Like often you want to be able to look at the door and be able to see who's coming, and it's just
Fire extinguishers.
subconscious to some point.
Yeah.
AEDs for you probably.
Yeah. keep an eye on people. Like, is he pale? Is he sweating? Is
Yeah.
he...
Right.
Yeah.
For you, it's probably, a couple guys yelling down the parking lot thing,
Just paying attention,
Right.
it's just,
situational awareness.
yeah,
We're
we're like, I think a lot of people who aren't involved in that, or somewhat oblivious, which
Mhm.
is actually a blessing to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about that earlier, just kind of parlaying into the subject, is how, it's sort of a good thing that the general public doesn't understand the amount of trauma that happens every day.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think the public really does understand it. They don't know how much stuff we see every day. They really don't. You see a blip on TV if there's a shooting, but you don't understand that there was trauma the entire day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I often relay to people, like, think about as a police officer or either one of their jobs. If your job is responding to everyone's worst day, that's what you do all day. Nobody calls us because it's happy. It's because someone's having a crisis
Exactly.
for every single thing we do all day. And that becomes, where I was talking about that cumulative thing, is just constantly being in the muck, day in, day out, every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So you do really, really have to get out of that mindset.
Mhm.
Whatever you do to do it, you have to get out of that mindset for a little bit every day, at night or whatever.
Mhm.
If I'm walking down the street and somebody's behind me from more than 3 blocks, I'll just make a turn. Like, it's just really weird things like that probably don't have a whole lot of basis in reality. But you remember, you had that guy shot 6 years ago. That's what they did. They followed him 6 blocks and then they shot him.
So a lot of your stories or a lot of your career stays with you as stories, and it becomes more of a defense mechanism later on down the line, and you do have to learn how to shut it off. You have to learn how to, and that's at the end of the day, you have family, you have people that need your time also. Plus, you need to have your own time. So, anything you would like to say to any of the listeners that may be struggling right now and possibly contemplating suicide?
I think that's a tough question.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that if I was to relay anything, is to just say that there's always another way. There's always a way out of whatever you're thinking you're in. There's always someone that's willing to listen. There's always someone that's willing to help you. And sometimes it might just take seeking that out. Or, for the rest of us who aren't struggling, is just pay attention to people and care about people, care about other people. And unfortunately we're getting further and further away from that in society. But, like, check on your neighbors. Know if your neighbors, if something's out of
Yes.
ordinary, if you see them out every day and then all of a sudden you don't see them, maybe check on them, see what, just talk to them. Go see if they're okay. And also sometimes I think we forget that either it's because we're afraid to or we just don't know how to. Just ask someone if they're okay. I think a lot of times we fear asking someone if they're okay because we don't necessarily know what to do if they're not okay. So we fear doing it. But a lot of
Yes.
times I think if someone just had someone ask, they would just talk,
Mhm.
and talking vents that pressure off. And it could make the difference. And I wanted to mention just something else, if we have the time, that I wrote down that I was thinking about that I found very, very interesting. I imagine you probably saw, there was a documentary, and there's a gentleman by the name of Kevin Hines.
Yes, we've had him here in York.
You're right, we have. And if you watched his documentary, one of the things he said was he was standing up on that bridge, and he was crying his eyes out, and a lady walked by him and asked him to take a picture of her. And he said she never asked why he was crying or what was happening.
And that's all he was waiting for.
And right, he said that possibly, probably, or more than likely would have made a difference in whether he jumped or not. And Kevin Hines, if you're not familiar, he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. So he talks about that. But the point being is, I think sometimes we just maybe don't know how to ask, and we just don't. instead of recognizing, because most humans can recognize if something's going on with another human being. It's just instinctual, but we don't always ask. So I think if that's something we could do, we could help a lot more people
Exactly.
get through it.
Exactly.
Just talk. You know,
Talk.
Just don't be afraid to talk. Know who your couple people are. And I remember somebody talking about this in reference to Anthony Bourdain's suicide. They said that they had asked him, you know, or he had been taught how to ask for help, but he'd never been taught how to receive. So they offered him a lot of suggestions. They offered him things, and he just never did them. All he wanted to know is that somebody cared about him.
Right.
But that you have to keep following through. And it's not necessarily to put it on the person that's, you know, experiencing those thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
but that, you know, continued care is important. But it all starts with being able to talk, being willing to put aside what you think people are going to think of you. Because I assure you, probably a majority of people are not going to think anything worse of you. But you
Mhm.
have to put aside that anxiety about what you think and just talk.
Very good. Thank you.
I think one of the most important things to remember is that you're not alone.
Okay.
Like I said, I've literally been on a ledge, and there are lots of people out there who have problems with their mental health, who feel like they don't want to go on, but I can assure you, you're not alone, and there will always be someone who will miss you, whether you may not know that right away, and you know, let people know that you care.
Yeah, it's the people that are left behind, that are left to hurt and grieve. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We always say that everyone goes home, but you know, we want to make sure that everybody comes back to their next shift too.
Very well said. Thank you very much. Thank you, all three of you, Michael, Matt, and Dustin, for joining us today. This has been very, very interesting conversation. If you or someone you know needs help, please call us at 717-451-6411 or the National Hotline number, which is 1-800-273-8255. You're important, so please reach out to someone you can talk to. For more suicide prevention services, call Suicide Prevention of York at 717-451-6411. Thank you, and thank you again for your services.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.